My wife of 1 month ran off with her one that got away, leaving me and our new restaurant dreams in ruins. Now she's crawling back, crying mistake, but I've moved on. Her line? You'll always be my safe harbor. My reply? This harbor's permanently closed, sweetheart. Never thought I'd be that guy. The one spilling his guts on the internet about the smoldering wreckage of his marriage. But life, as they say, has a sick sense of humor. My name is Liam. I'm a chef. And just over a year ago, I poured my life savings, my sweat, and pretty much every waking thought into opening my dream restaurant, the Embered Plate. It was more than a restaurant. It was my heart served on a platter. Before the restaurant, there was Sophia. We met a few years back. She was an event planner, a whirlwind of organized chaos and dazzling smiles, coordinating a food festival where I was just a guest chef trying not to set anything on fire. There was an instant spark, an easy rhythm between us. 2, maybe 3 years flew by in what felt like a golden haze of shared dreams and late-night talks about the future. We wanted the same things, or so I believed. A bustling restaurant, a cozy home, maybe a couple of kids down the line. Looking back, I wasn't entirely blind to certain nuances. Sophia had a taste for the finer things, a certain self-assuredness that sometimes bordered on self-absorption, and her relationship with her best friend, Ethan, was intense. He was always there, a flamboyant, ever-present shadow. I chalked it up to wedding jitters on her part, or maybe I just hoped she'd eventually find her own center without needing Ethan's constant, fawning validation. Spoiler alert, she didn't. The wedding itself was a spectacle. Sophia, being an event planner, orchestrated the whole thing. It was held at this achingly trendy, ridiculously expensive vineyard, the kind of place where the air itself probably cost money. I footed a huge chunk of the bill, money that was also meant to be the lifeblood of the Embered Plate in its critical first year. Ethan, naturally, was Sophia's man of honor. His toasts were masterpieces of passive aggression, full of flowery compliments for Sophia and backhanded remarks about me trying to keep up with her supposed brilliance. He always had this proprietary air around her, like he was a connoisseur and she was his prized exhibit. I brushed it off. Love, right? It makes you a damned fool. Our honeymoon in Tuscany was a brief, sun-drenched escape. We ate our way through Italy, which I rationalized as culinary research for me and pure, unadulterated bliss for us. Then, it was back to reality, back to the grueling, exhilarating launch of the Embered Plate. Sophia seemed supportive, though a little distant. I told myself it was just her own demanding schedule. It was almost exactly 1 month to the day we said I do. 1 month. We still had a pile of unopened wedding gifts in the spare room. That's when the shift happened. The real shift. She became distant. Her phone, once a casual accessory, was now practically glued to her hand, always angled away from me, its screen a fortress I wasn't allowed to enter. Late nights were suddenly filled with client emergencies that never quite seemed to materialize in her work stories the next day, and hushed phone calls that would abruptly end the moment I walked into the room. Being already a little wary from Ethan's previous behavior, I started paying closer attention. Ethan was around more than ever, always whispering with Sophia, those secretive huddles that would cease the second I got close. I once overheard him telling her, his voice dripping with faux concern, "You deserve the absolute best, darling. Don't ever settle for anything less." The implication hung heavy in the air. I tried to talk to her, asked her directly, calmly, if everything was okay between us, pointing out her increasing remoteness. She'd just wave a dismissive hand, blaming stress, work, anything but the truth. That was line number. Hell, I'd already lost count by then, and the real storm hadn't even hit. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday. I just finished a brutal 16-hour shift at the Embered Plate. We'd been slammed, a supplier had flaked, one of my line cooks called in sick, the usual beautiful chaos of a new restaurant finding its feet. I got home late, smelling of wood smoke, garlic, and a faint hint of desperation, expecting to find Sophia either asleep or mildly annoyed at my lateness. Instead, I found her in the living room, curled up on the sofa, crying. Not loud, hysterical sobs, but that silent, shoulder-shaking kind that tells you something fundamental has broken. I sat down, a knot of dread tightening in my gut. My first thought, stupidly, was that someone in her family was ill. I braced myself. This was it. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this wasn't about work stress or a bad day. I decided I couldn't keep tiptoeing around the obvious anymore. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just looked at her, my voice quieter than I expected, and said, "Sophia, what's going on? We need to talk honestly." Flustered, cornered, the dam finally broke. She confessed. She'd reconnected with Marcus. Marcus Thorne, her charismatic ex from years before I came along, a hospitality mogul who owned half the trendy hotels and bars in the city, and who had helped her realize she had unresolved feelings. Ethan, of course. He'd apparently been coaching her through this journey of self-discovery. She'd met Marcus for coffee, then dinner, then, well, she trailed off, but the implication was clear. She framed it all as her needing to explore this connection for her own happiness before we got too deeply enmeshed. The audacity was breathtaking. My mind, instead of dissolving into a red mist of rage, went into an oddly calm, analytical overdrive. I thought of the restaurant, our intertwined finances, the vows we'd made just weeks ago. "How long, Sophia?" I asked, my voice dangerously level. "How long has this reconnection been going on?" Her eyes flickered. "And have you discussed our finances with him? Or with Ethan?" She mumbled something about it being recent, about it not being about money. Then came the real kicker. With a newfound, almost defiant resolve, probably words Ethan had fed her, she announced she'd already packed an overnight bag. Marcus was expecting her. Ethan, that snake, had helped her orchestrate the whole damn thing. He might as well have driven the getaway car. I stood up. I think she expected me to shatter, to plead, to make grand, desperate promises. Instead, a cold, hard clarity settled over me. "Okay," I said, the word like a chip of ice. "While you're going to him, I'll be calling my lawyer first thing in the morning. And my best friend, Noah, is coming over tonight to help me change the locks on these doors. You can arrange a time with my lawyer to pick up the rest of your things. Don't come back here unannounced." Sophia stared, her mouth agape, the tears momentarily forgotten. This wasn't the reaction she'd been coached for. This wasn't an Ethan script. She stammered something about me being heartless, about not understanding. I just held the door open. The sound of her suitcase wheels clicking on the hardwood floor as she walked out was the punctuation mark on the end of our sham marriage. Click-clack. Done. The moment the door closed, the adrenaline hit. I locked it, then immediately called Noah. "Dude," I said, my voice hoarse. "Get over here. Bring your toolbox." And a very large bottle of whiskey. My wife just left me for her ex. Then I made another call to my bank, instructing them to flag any unusual activity on our joint accounts and to prevent any large withdrawals without my explicit, in-person authorization. It felt like I was sealing a tomb. And honestly, good riddance. Noah arrived within the hour, toolbox in one hand, a bottle of aged bourbon in the other. He took one look at my face, the open suitcase Sophia had forgotten in her haste, and just nodded. No judgment, no platitudes, just a quiet, "Let's get to work." We changed the locks on every door, the metallic clicks echoing the finality of it all. The whiskey helped. The next morning, I met with Mr. Henderson, the divorce attorney Sophia's own father, David, had recommended. Henderson was a bulldog in a bespoke suit, sharp, no nonsense, and visibly impressed by the proactive steps I'd already taken. Changing the locks immediately and flagging the bank accounts? Smart moves, Mr. Hayes. Most people are still in shock at this stage. I laid out everything. The short marriage, Sophia's name on some of the initial business setup accounts for the Embered Plate, a naive gesture of partnership on my part, my concerns about Marcus's influence. Henderson listened intently, his pen scratching notes. He outlined a strategy to protect my assets, especially the restaurant, and to expedite the divorce. Later that day, David, Sophia's father, showed up at the restaurant during the lull between lunch and dinner service. He looked older, tired, the lines on his face etched deeper. He was a retired police captain, a man who radiated integrity, and his disappointment in Sophia was palpable. "Liam," he said, his voice heavy, "I came to apologize for my daughter's egregious lack of character. And for that parasite, Ethan, who's clearly been poisoning her mind for years." He then shared more specific, troubling insights about Marcus Thorne. "In my years on the force, I saw Thorne's type. He doesn't build things, Liam. He acquires them, uses them up, and moves on. People, businesses, it doesn't matter to him. He has a history of charming women with access to funds, then leaving them high and dry. David even offered to make a few discreet calls to some old contacts, see what they could dig up about Marcus's current financial stability. Forewarned is forearmed," he said grimly. The emotional body blows kept coming. Ben, Sophia's younger brother, who worked part-time for me at the Ember Plate, washing dishes and prepping, showed up for his shift looking like someone had kicked his puppy. The kid idolized me, and he was torn apart. With tears in his eyes, he confessed he'd seen Sophia texting Marcus weeks before the wedding. "Ethan was always there," Ben choked out, "telling her Marcus was legacy and you were project. He told her to keep her options open. Even then, I didn't know what to do, Liam. I'm so sorry." The poor kid's confession was another knife in the gut, but it also hardened my resolve. This wasn't a sudden mistake on Sophia's part. It was a calculated deception. Ben, bless his conflicted heart, became an unwilling but crucial source of intel. He'd overhear his mother, Caroline, on tearful, hushed phone calls with Sophia. Apparently, Sophia was already complaining that Marcus was more demanding than she remembered, and that Ethan was constantly in her ear, pushing her to invest. That was the word she used, in one of Marcus's new, can't-miss ventures. Caroline, meanwhile, tried her own brand of intervention, calling me and pleading for me to be patient, to forgive and forget. On Mr. Henderson's firm advice, I politely but unequivocally referred all her future communications to him. The first real skirmish came quickly. Henderson called a few days later. "Good thing you flagged those accounts, Liam. Sophia, or someone acting on her behalf, attempted to transfer a rather substantial sum from your joint savings account yesterday. Your bank, per your instructions, blocked it pending your verification. That was all the confirmation I needed. The lines weren't just drawn, they were carved in stone. With the initial shock waves subsiding, my focus narrowed to a single point, the Ember Plate. It was my sanctuary, my battlefield. If Sophia, Marcus, and Ethan thought they could shatter my life and my dreams simultaneously, they were about to learn otherwise. Then came a call from Maya. She was a bright culinary intern I'd met her a couple of years back, given her a solid recommendation that helped her land a gig as an assistant to a prominent and notoriously sharp-tongued food blogger. "Chef Hayes," she said, her voice urgent, "I think I have something you need to see. It's about Ethan Thorne." Turns out, Maya had been accidentally included on an email chain where Ethan was boasting to a rival PR agent about his masterful strategy in discrediting the Ember Plate. He'd been feeding false negative whispers to certain bloggers, trying to steer influential critics away, painting my restaurant as a struggling, mismanaged venture. He even specifically mentioned trying to torpedo an upcoming review from the city's most respected food critic. His motive? To make me look like a failing bet, thereby making Sophia's decision to leave for the stable and successful Marcus seem more rational, and to curry favor with Marcus himself. Armed with Maya's damning emails, I didn't just seethe. Noah and I huddled, crafting a counteroffensive. We discreetly reached out to that same respected critic Ethan had tried to deter, not mentioning the sabotage, but simply extending a personal invitation for an anonymous visit, confident in what the Ember Plate could deliver. I also had Maya's boss, the influential blogger, subtly seed counter-narratives about unscrupulous competitors trying to smear rising stars. It was a gamble, but it was better than being a sitting duck. The gamble paid off. The critic came, unannounced, and a week later published a glowing, almost poetic review that sent reservations through the roof. Ethan's whispers were drowned out by a chorus of praise. Meanwhile, Ben's reluctant updates painted a grim picture of Sophia's new fairy tale. Marcus, the suave charmer, had morphed into a controlling, dismissive partner. He paraded Sophia at events like a newly acquired trophy, but openly belittled her event planning career as a cute little hobby. The real pressure point, though, was financial. Marcus was relentlessly pushing Sophia to liquidate her personal assets, some inheritance money and her own not insignificant savings, to invest in his latest high-risk, high-reward nightclub venture. And Ethan, ever the loyal viper, was constantly at Sophia's side, echoing Marcus's talking points, reassuring her it was a brilliant move. Other allies surfaced. Clara, a pragmatic former senior colleague of Sophia's who'd always had a soft spot for me, called out of the blue. She'd recently left their old company to start her own boutique agency. "Liam, I heard about Sophia," she said, her tone sympathetic but firm. "She called me a few days ago, fishing for advice, sounding miserable. Marcus is apparently a financial black hole dressed in a designer suit. He's isolating her, and that Ethan is no friend to her. He's playing his own game." Clara mentioned that Sophia seemed genuinely scared of Marcus's temper when she hesitated about the investment. Adding another layer to the grim picture, David's old police contacts came through. They discreetly confirmed that Marcus's nightclub project was indeed teetering on the brink of collapse. Rumors of unpaid contractors, bounced checks, and potential investigations into some of his more creative accounting practices were swirling. David relayed this to Mr. Henderson, who filed it away. The cracks in the villain's facade were beginning to show, and I was determined to make sure my restaurant, my creation, stood strong while their house of cards tumbled. While Sophia's gilded cage was showing its cracks, the ember plate was hitting its stride. The critics' rave review had opened the floodgates. We were booked solid for weeks. The kitchen hummed with a focused energy, and for the first time in months, I felt a sliver of genuine, uncomplicated pride. Then came the email that made my jaw drop. The Ember Plate was nominated for Best New Restaurant by the City Culinary Guild. It was a validation that resonated deep in my bones. Just as my professional life was soaring, Sophia's came crashing down. Clara called with an update. Apparently, Marcus, his financial situation growing more desperate by the day, had escalated his pressure on Sophia. The details were murky, but it involved him trying to get her to sign papers that would essentially make her liable for his failing nightclub debts. Sophia, finally seeing the abyss she was staring into, had refused. There was a monumental fight. She'd walked out, taking only what she could carry, reportedly broke and utterly humiliated. Clara said she'd even found evidence Marcus had forged some preliminary investment commitments in her name. A few days later, the inevitable happened. My doorbell rang late one evening. It was Sophia. She looked like a ghost, pale, thin, dark circles under her eyes, a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman I'd married, and an even starker contrast to the glittering socialite she portrayed on Instagram while with Marcus. She launched into a tearful, rambling monologue. It was all there: the catastrophic mistake, Marcus the manipulative fraud, Ethan the betrayer, how she missed me, our life, our real, genuine connection. It was a performance, albeit a desperate one. The old Liam, the one who'd once loved her, might have felt a pang of pity. But that Liam was gone, burned away by the betrayals. I listened, my expression unreadable, until she finally ran out of steam. Then I spoke, my voice calm but devoid of any warmth. "Sophia," I began, "this wasn't one mistake. This was a series of calculated choices. A betrayal that started with secret texts to your ex before our wedding vows were even cold. You lied consistently. You schemed with Ethan, who actively tried to sabotage my livelihood. You attempted to drain our joint savings account the moment you walked out. You stood by while your supposed best friend tried to destroy the one thing I had left." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. There's nothing left to rebuild here. Our story is over. I've moved on, and for your own sake, you need to find a way to do the same. I didn't raise my voice, didn't rage. I just laid out the cold, hard facts. Her face crumpled. A week after that unwelcome visit, opportunity knocked, loud and clear. A prestigious restaurant group from Vancouver, Canada, impressed by the national buzz around the Embered Plate and my innovative culinary style, reached out. They offered me an executive chef position and a full partnership in a new, high-profile flagship restaurant they were launching. It was everything a chef could dream of: creative freedom, significant financial backing, a chance to build something truly spectacular on an international stage. I negotiated hard, ensuring opportunities for my key loyal staff from the Embered Plate, including Ben if he wanted a new adventure. Then I accepted. It was a clean slate, a new horizon. News of my impending move to Vancouver and the successful sale of my majority stake in the Embered Plate to a delighted private investor Noah had cultivated spread like wildfire. Sophia heard. Her desperation escalated. The calls started, long, unhinged voicemails oscillating between blaming me for abandoning her and begging me to take her to Vancouver, to start fresh, just us. Then came the texts, then the attempts to corner me outside my apartment. On Mr. Henderson's advice, we had a formal cease and desist letter delivered to her, warning against any further harassment. All communications were now strictly through our respective lawyers. Noah and Ben became my unofficial bodyguards, shielding me from her increasingly erratic attempts to make contact. The harbor was closed, and I was setting my sights on new, distant shores. My friends and the incredible staff who had weathered the storm with me at the Embered Plate insisted on throwing a farewell party. It also doubled as a celebration for the Best New Restaurant award, which we'd officially won. Noah, bless his organizational skills, booked a chic rooftop bar downtown. Knowing Sophia's recent pattern of escalating behavior, he'd also quietly arranged for a couple of discreet but very capable private security guys to be present. Just in case, he'd said with a grimace. I was touched by the gesture and honestly a little relieved. The party was in full swing. I was feeling a genuine sense of lightness, of closure mixed with excitement for the future. I was mid-sentence, thanking my team, when a stir rippled through the crowd near the entrance. And there she was, Sophia, dressed in the same deep sapphire blue dress she'd worn on our third date. The one I'd foolishly told her was the moment I knew I was falling in love with her. Theatrical to the last. She clearly intended to make a dramatic, public appeal. Before she could launch into whatever speech she'd rehearsed, the security guys, looking like regular well-dressed guests, smoothly and professionally intercepted her. They were calm, polite but firm. She started to raise her voice, her eyes darting towards me, a desperate, pleading look on her face. I just watched, a strange detachment settling over me. I didn't engage. And then, in a moment of cosmic, cringe-worthy timing, Marcus Thorne himself walked into the bar. He was with a new woman, someone younger, taller, with an air of bored amusement. As Sophia was being quietly but effectively managed by security, this new woman looked towards the minor commotion, then leaned into Marcus and said, loud enough for several people to overhear, "Oh dear, Marcus, is that your little charity case making a scene again? How terribly déclassé." Marcus, who had just spotted Sophia, went pale. He saw me watching. Mortified, he grabbed his companion's arm and practically sprinted towards a private area, not even a backward glance at the woman he'd supposedly cherished. The look of utter, soul-crushing humiliation on Sophia's face was almost pitiable. Almost. Security finally convinced Sophia to leave. As they escorted her out, she tried to thrust a crumpled letter into my hand. I simply shook my head and stepped back. Noah picked it up after she'd gone. Later that night, back at my place with Noah and Ben, we opened it. It was pages of rambling, self-pitying revisionist history, painting herself as the tragic victim of circumstance and everyone else's manipulations. We read a few particularly galling passages aloud, shared a dark, weary laugh, and then, with a sense of grim satisfaction, we ceremoniously fed it to the flames in my fireplace. Ashes to ashes, lies to dust. The epilogue to the villains wrote itself over the next few weeks. Maya's food blogger boss, armed with the irrefutable evidence of Ethan's sabotage, published a scathing exposé on unethical PR tactics in the culinary world. Ethan wasn't just named. He was professionally crucified. His burgeoning career imploded. Marcus's nightclub venture didn't just fail. It went down in a blaze of lawsuits from unpaid contractors and disgruntled investors, some of whom David's contact had discreetly warned. His carefully cultivated image as a Midas-touch mogul was irrevocably tarnished. A few weeks later, I was at the airport, ready to board my flight to Vancouver. Chloe, the lead designer from the Vancouver restaurant group, was there too, heading back on the same flight after our final logistical meetings. We were chatting animatedly about the new restaurant's design when I saw them. Sophia, looking lost and towing a suitcase, with a stone-faced, furious David right behind her. He'd found out she'd bought a ticket. Not to Vancouver, but to Seattle, apparently planning some desperate, last-ditch airport ambush. David was there to personally ensure it didn't happen. He didn't mince words. In the middle of the bustling terminal, David confronted his daughter, his voice low but carrying the weight of a judge's gavel. "This stops now, Sophia. You will not harass him further. You're coming home, and you're going to get professional help." His authority, the sheer force of his disappointment, made Sophia shrink. She made one final, broken plea to me, her eyes filled with a desperate, wild hope. I looked at her, then at Chloe, who gave me a small, understanding nod. I turned back to Sophia. "What we had, Sophia," I said, my voice quiet but firm, "died when the trust did. It's gone. I'm building something new now, something honest. For your own sake, I genuinely hope you find a way to do the same. Goodbye." And with that, I turned and walked with Chloe towards the gate, toward my new life. There was no triumph, just a profound sense of release. The harbor was closed, all right. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the waters ahead looked clear, open, and full of promise.